The cliff is coming. Fitness and muscle mass are your best investment in retirement fund as we age. Let's talk protein, muscle mass, and strength as we age in this episode. The $100 billion rehab question is, how does someone who has had a fall and has lost mobility confidence believe in their balance again? With a fall comes the paralyzing fear of another, and with it, the loss of mobility, strength, energy, and independence. The list goes on, and that's the bad news, and usually where the downward health spiral begins, and illness and aging complications win. My name is David Dancero, physical therapist and certified aging in place specialist. Now for the good news. It doesn't have to end that way. Welcome to the Believe in Balance podcast, where I'll show you another path forward. Tune in as I share the top strategies and exercises to help you regain control over your balance using research-driven insights, evidence-based programs, and advice from industry leaders in aging and wellness and longevity. Whether you're already suffered a fall or had a few close calls and know you need to take charge and become more proactive about your balance health, this podcast is for you. You're sure to feel empowered and inspired to try something new in each episode. Ready? Let's get started. Welcome to episode 14 of the Believe in Balance podcast. My name's Dave Dancero, and I am covering the topic of protein, sarcopenia, muscle, strength. I was listening to a podcast earlier this morning. Dr. Attia is The Drive, and he had Rhonda Patrick from Found My Fitness. I listened to both of their podcasts and content when I have a chance. Many of them run long, but one of the things that really struck me in this episode was it was paralleling a lot of the topics that we're talking about in my Believe in Balance workshop and course, and a lot of the great feedback I received from some of the participants that have gone through to date. But let me just read a little bit more from what I opened. Dr. Attia and Dr. Patrick were talking about, we need to prepare for the rainy day. You need to build up as much strength, stamina, and fitness today as you can. And that's, as much as you can muster, because they talked about the cliff is coming, and fitness and muscle mass are your best investment as a retirement fund as we age. And that's kind of what we were talking about when I gave the financial side of staying sedentary in my Believe in Balance workshop. And I looked at a lot of the data that came in, 24 days into the replay now from the live event, the 1st of October. And the average age of most of my participants going through are late 50s to mid 70s. And two questions or two responses to polls I asked really stand out and kind of relates to this episode that Peter Attia was talking about to Dr. Patrick about protein needs. Because I asked towards the end, one of the questions was, what do you have any awareness of the amount of protein you take in on a regular basis? Because we know that the studies show now that one of the things that can facilitate or accelerate the loss of lean muscle mass, being sedentary and not strength training is one, certainly, or being sedentary and just not active at all, will accelerate the decline that we usually see with aging, but also having adequate protein and lean quality protein. And some 70% of folks that responded also had no idea how much protein they took in. So I asked that intentionally for a question to build out another module as we build in these workshops. But that kind of went to the discussion with the latest science about protein needs with that episode. I'll put it in the show notes too. These episodes from Dr. Attia, they do run long, so I usually put them on double speed, or this one I had on when I was working out early this morning. So it resonated. And the other question that came up in the workshop about what is their perception of falling? And I gave three choices. One, changes to medication. One being less active, or just if people's mindset were just that they were getting old, and that was leading to their decreased balance confidence. And many that was pretty evenly split, and most actually were very honest and said, I'm getting more sedentary. I'm not moving. I want to, with that said, this whole conversation and dialogue, excuse me for 1 second, I just want to pick up something that I want to read here. Okay, I'm back. It fell during my setup. Last minute, I had to change the location of this recording because my neighbors decided to take down a bunch of trees. So hopefully you don't hear a lot of activity in the back. But this brought me back to the beginning of my PT training when I wrote an article for a research paper going way back to talking about the effects that progressive resistance exercise training can have on sarcopenia in the elderly and aging adults. When it really hit home when I heard Dr. Attia say that the average number of folks globally, or in the U.S., I should say, that actually do any formal strength training is less than 25%. And that I remember from a report I read too. And then when they drilled down to an aging population and over 65, they said that drops even lower to just under 20% that actually report that they do any strength training at all. And the concept of strength training in sarcopenia is not new. And I want to actually read right from the research that I did going back some 20, 25 years. It shows we haven't moved. We've known this for a long time that adults and especially seniors can strength train and get favorable results. So the data that was reported by Dr. Attia on his podcast isn't new by any means, but I want to read this because one of the reasons I built out my course, Body and Balance, is to address the fact that we're not doing programming. We know the data, we're not moving the needle, but we know sarcopenia is one of the things that can get people to lose their independence. And so when I wrote about it, I wrote that sarcopenia, or age-related loss of a muscle mass, is one of the physiological changes associated with advancing age. And aging has also been associated with an increased incidence of several chronic diseases, including coronary artery disease, non-insulin dependent diabetes, and osteoporosis. We talked about some of these on the podcast, on the workshop recently. Loss of muscle mass primarily accounts for age-related diseases, decreases in basal metabolic rate. At the end of our discussion on the workshop, we did talk about the energy balance equation and RMR, resting metabolic rate. So here, when we talk about basal metabolic rate and muscle strength and activity levels, though, there's a direct correlation to how much you're moving and how you're able to keep that side of your furnace burning. These changes bring about decreased energy requirements in the elderly, often leading to increased body fat content, lowered aerobic capacity, and an overall decrease in functional independence. When I did a review in the literature back then, the very old and frail elderly experienced muscle atrophy as a result of disuse, disease, and undernutrition. And we talked about that for obvious reasons in the poll that I conducted to kind of give more evidence to those theories. And they hold true from the participants so far in the workshop. There is evidence to suggest that progressive resistance training in the elderly can offset age-associated sarcopenia and can positively influence energy expenditure. You can actually grow muscle, and you improve function and dependence. Again, the whole reason for the Believe in Balance course. The capacity of older men and women to adapt to regularly performed exercises has been established by many studies. I'm going to talk about some that really made an impact on me even then at the beginning of my studies in PT. Aerobic exercise results in improvements to functional capacity and reduced risk of developing type 2 diabetes in the elderly. High-intensity resistance training, above 60% of one repetition maximum, that is, causes large increases in muscle strength and muscle size in the elderly. So it is true, you can still build muscle as you age. Resistance training also significantly increases energy requirements and improves insulin action of the elderly. Functionally based training programs, again, i.e. Believe in Balance, aimed at improving performance and balance in activities of daily living, such as stair climbing, also demonstrate that elderly skeletal muscle exhibits the plasticity. On the last episode, we talked about neuroplasticity and brain training, needed to adapt and respond positively to imposed stress or stimulus. The functional training study completed by the research team, Kress et al., looked at the response to physical training at the cellular and whole muscle level by measuring and evaluating changes in muscle ultrastructure as it relates to performance. And they did talk about this on Attia's podcast about, now as technologies have improved to look at things at the cellular level, this has even been confirmed further. In this 1-year functionally based exercise program, that was both aerobic at 75% heart reserve and resistant weighted stair climbing with ankle weights, and resulted in positive structural changes of the skeletal muscle contractile proteins at levels in subjects studied. The healthy adult women were aged from the ages of 65 to 83 years of age. So what the data showed that the effects of these structural changes at the muscular cellular level from strength training translate to improved functional ability of the lower body for climbing stairs. These results give evidence that in older women, a mild functionally based training program, something of mid-intensity, in other words, can improve leg power and enhance stair climbing and walking ability. The performance in ADLs may become easier as a result of the improved muscle structure and function of the lower body, enhancing the ability to live independently. And when we went to the last slide on our Believe in Balance workshop, I talked about how that actually happens to the energy output side of the equation. You become a better burner when you get up more and you have more mobility confidence as your balance improves. The effects of resistance training on muscle structure in older men was investigated by Hurley et al. Resistance training or strength conditioning is generally defined as training in which the resistance against which a muscle generates force is progressively increased over time, basic concept of loading the muscle. His study was designed to test the effects of a full-body, high-intensity strength conditioning program on 35 sedentary male subjects, again, around that same age range, between 50 and 69 years of age, over 16 weeks. Subjective self-reported muscle soreness scores and measures of serum creatine kinase were analyzed in the study. High levels of serum creatine kinase, or CK, released from the muscle to the blood are associated with injury to the muscle and cell membranes. Many recent studies have indicated that older individuals can increase muscle mass with resistance training, but none of these previous studies reported measures of muscle soreness and muscle cell injury. The results of the study demonstrated that older men can safely participate in total body strength training programs intense enough to produce substantial increases in muscle mass, over 43% over an increase of 6 weeks when the values were summed up. And hypertrophy, they grew about 7.2% increase in mid-thigh muscle mass when they measured that by MRI, without promoting muscle soreness or significant muscle cell disruption. Note on this, a series of 4 low resistance exercise sessions were completed by all subjects in the study as an accommodation period for developing proper weightlifting techniques. So before they studied, they do this because these sessions were also used to help control for large gains in strength, oftentimes when someone, due to motor learning often seen the way at initial stages of training, especially when previously used with previously sedentary subjects like this study design was. So the significance in physical therapy, and if we apply this to the course, Believe in Balance, we know that muscle weakness that accompanies advanced age has been positively related to the risk of falling and fractures in older individuals. Applications from these studies for physical therapists are encouraging for help in possibly overcoming some of this age-linked muscle weakness or sarcopenia. For example, the physical therapist can view the research that I've mentioned as having importance for translating the specificity of training principles to functional activities, such as we saw stair climbing. PTs know that as ADLs too. Also, of practical importance for PTs from this study was the finding that showed improvements from strength training at a moderate intensity level over longer periods of time, 1 year. This is the exact design and model intentionally of the Believe in Balance course and workshop based on the Otago model, where folks are followed over a year, and it's moderate intensity, so it can accommodate a number of individuals from those sedentary sitting in chairs, which I've worked with plenty that have started that way, to being able to improve their ADLs significantly, to strengthen their balance confidence. Some previous research had suggested that only high-intensity resistance training would result in strength gains in the elderly. This information, again, dispelling that myth, can be used for PTs who may consider high-intensity training a contraindication for clients with special medical conditions or physical limitations. And if you're listening to me and you're a stroke survivor, that's one of the things that, another myth that we need to dispel is that we don't push our stroke survivors hard enough. They oftentimes have a double whammy. Their gait, their balance is impaired. They have a limb that is immediately taken out of the equation or significantly impaired. And we have to work extra hard, but push extra hard to get that return of function. So we really fight that sarcopenia to the best of our ability. So the findings of both the studies that I mentioned indicate that both older men and women can achieve significant gains in strength, muscle hypertrophy or growth, and functional performance as a result of well-planned resistance exercise programs. And the Believe in Balance program combines stretching, strengthening, balance activities, and cardiovascular. So it's well positioned to fit the bill for an individual who might be looking to get more physically active. So fitness programs designed to improve muscle strength can be recommended for old individuals as an effective countermeasure to the sarcopenia of old age. Because the often sedentary lifestyles of old individuals may exacerbate losses of muscle function, physical therapists working with the elderly will need to know how to apply safe and effective training programs. PTs must not ignore that the target population most at risk for sarcopenia is often frail, institutionalized elderly. Now, that term we'd probably say assisted living or retirement community men and women, but you get the picture. Prescribing exercise in the elderly population requires that the physical therapist be able to plan for a wide variability in functional status, medical status, training intensity, and duration. And that's the design of the Believe in Balance program. A practical example of how these principles can be applied effectively was demonstrated in a population of 100 nursing home residents that were randomly assigned high-intensity strength training programs, and it resulted in significant gains in functional strength and status. This was a hallmark study when I was new to PT, and it was done by Dr. Bill Evans up at Tufts at the time in Boston. And for me, it really was extraordinary because when I actually saw the videos reported on the news, it had taken individuals prior to training that were wheelchair bound, and in addition to more spontaneous activity after the training protocol is implemented, the other thing that piqued my interest, they were actually using activity monitors, and I was doing some work in that area at the time too. Their mobility increased significantly in those participating in the exercise program, and there was no change in the activity level as the sedentary control group. Thus, exercise may minimize or reverse the syndrome of physical frailty and fall risk prevalent among very old individuals. We call them seniors now. Physical therapists, as well as other health professionals providing interventions for the elderly, could utilize strength training and balance training programs as a powerful tool in the prevention of age-associated sarcopenia. So in conclusion here, I just wanted to say adopting a preventative attitude and encouraging an active lifestyle throughout the early decades of the lifespan would be the first line of defense to enhance the ability to offset loss of aging. So just like we talked about diving over that cliff eventually is coming. Putting in those investments now, those inputs, meaning those workouts, as Dr. Attia mentioned, are your best kind of retirement insurance fund, if you will. Building or maintaining muscle mass at an older age or becoming physically active for the first time at older age may present challenges for the PT in charge of developing older individual fitness programs. If you need a program that's packaged and ready to go as a PT, reach out to me, because when the course is done, Believe in Balance is going to be able to be distributed to PT clinics and community centers. The therapist must realize that the concept of strength training may be completely foreign to an older individual, and careful instruction must be provided to alleviate fears and build on attainable goals. Finally, working effectively with other medical professionals who hopefully understand the importance of participation of our senior population in exercise will be an important component of the success of any program, but certainly that's why I'm starting with this workshop concept and just creating awareness, maybe changing belief right out of the name of the program, Believe in Balance. We know exercise is just as important at 80 as it is at 18, but getting the word out and obtaining compliance are all part of the challenges faced by PTs and a community now that is being challenged by healthcare. As I mentioned in the course and workshop, the crisis that is upon us, we're now 23 days into a shutdown, and we're looking at healthcare costs without any intervention at the Fed that are probably going to double and maybe even triple. So more than ever, your best investment is moving. And I think I'll leave it at that. If you're hearing this podcast for the first time, want to learn more about my Believe in Balance workshop and upcoming course, I'll put information in the show notes. But I think that's all for now. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay well, keep the faith, stay on your feet, and keep moving forward.